In the past few weeks, we've tried to bring you a few different views on New York's influx of asylum seekers. And make no mistake, this situation is complex, and it's not going away anytime soon. It's estimated that as many as 100,000 people seeking asylum have now arrived in New York. Most of them are in New York City, but a very small fraction have been relocated upstate, with more expected to leave the 5 boroughs as the crisis continues. But this situation has highlighted an ideological divide in New York at a time when political tensions are high ahead of next year's midterm elections. And politics, as we told you, is very much at play here. Some upstate officials, not all, have been resistant to the asylum seekers, saying this should be handled by Democrats in New York City, who've touted their willingness to welcome migrants in the past. But New York City Mayor Eric Adams says all of New York should be helping with the crisis, which he says could cost the city $12 billion by summer 2025.
It's $12 billion. That has to come from somewhere. Every service in this city, when we were at $4 billion, I stated that every service in this city will be impacted. So imagine when we had $12 billion. Every service in this city is going to be impacted.
And it's not just the city. I asked Governor Kathy Hochul this week how that cost could affect the state's finances as she prepares a state budget proposal for January. Here's what she said.
We are going to be helping the mayor, without a doubt. And that's why the conversations are starting now about what we're going to need next year as well. So that is a very high number. It may be less than it ultimately, but I know the state is going to continue helping the mayor of New York with an unprecedented humanitarian crisis to make sure these individuals are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve.
And part of that cost shift could come with relocating more asylum seekers to other parts of the state, which upstate officials are mixed on. But they also say that's going to require planning and coordination with city officials, and that hasn't always happened. While officials in Rochester got a heads up this week before 77 asylum seekers were sent there and welcomed those migrants, a recent situation in Schenectady County played out differently. That's where, in July, a Super 8 motel evicted all of its guests, including long-term residents, to make room for a group of asylum seekers. And in that situation, no one says they were given notice from the New York City mayor's office, which created a lot of confusion and left some people without a home. So now, while this situation continues to evolve, some state lawmakers say there needs to be a fix. That includes Assemblymember Angelo Santabarbara, a Democrat who represents the city of Rotterdam. He's sponsoring a bill that he says would prevent a repeat of what happened in his district as more asylum seekers make their way upstate. We sat down this week to discuss the bill and how this crisis has played out. Assemblymember Santabarbara, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show. Great to be back.
Of course, anytime. So this is a new bill. It has a few parts to it. I want to go over the bill first and then kind of unwrap what is inside of it and what the implications of it would be. The first is about communication, and I think this is key to this entire situation that we've been talking to over the past year. When the asylum seekers came to New York City, the mayor of New York City complained about the lack of communication from the governor of Texas, sending the migrants to New York City originally. This is a bill that you're saying that there needs to be more communication coming out of New York City to upstate communities or on Long Island where these migrants would be going. So tell me how that would work and what you would like to see in terms of more communication there.
Well, essentially, and now what you said is right. There was complaints about other states, lack of communication from other states and this entire process. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is that Mayor Adams is engaging in that same type of behavior. And the most recent situation is what happened at the Super 8 motel in Rotterdam, where we received zero communication, zero coordination. We were just as surprised as everyone else, left to discover what happened only after it happened. People that were thrown out of the Super 8 with an hour's notice, just essentially evicted that day, told to gather their belongings and leave. They weren't told why. Some of them thought it was an emergency of some sort. So what this bill does is this bill is going to require that advance notice if you are moving individuals, 30-day notice to let the receiving county know that, hey, we're planning to do this so that it's not a secretive process, which For government to operate in secret like this, it's just unacceptable.
And it's not good for anybody, like in terms of communication. If they're not prepared to take these migrants at the location, then for one, it's not good for the asylum seekers because they're being sent around and they don't know what's happening. And for the locality, I assume it's frustrating not to get that heads up. In the Rotterdam situation, I'm curious, how did you find out? I mean, if you weren't given a heads up by the mayor.
We started to get get phone calls at our office asking what was going on there. Some people thought the building was being condemned, shut down. We didn't even know who was on the buses at that point. But then we were able to figure out exactly what was happening, and then we received news of people being forced out of their home. Which, look, there's a whole nother discussion going on with the Attorney General's office, which I think amounts to illegal evictions. But the Attorney General hopefully will be looking into that. So this bill is going to require that you report this information and provide some relevant information that can help counties make a determination. For starters, how many individuals are coming? This number in Rotterdam kept changing, and it's still changing. And it is chaotic. It's unfair, and it doesn't benefit any party involved. It really ends up hurting everybody. It's just not a good situation that's gonna lead to a positive outcome. Mayor of New York City, I wrote him a letter. I explained to Mayor Adams, this is irresponsible behavior. This type of behavior has to stop. Now, not to take away with my conversations with the Attorney General, because people need to be held accountable for what happened at the Super 8 in Rotterdam. People got thrown out. The motel owner, as we discussed before the show started, they bear responsibility here. They went through and they actually threw people out. The mayor of New York City continuing this behavior that is hurting communities. It's hurting the individuals that they're actually trying to help. So it's not a good situation. So the AG really needs to get to the bottom of this. They have the resources to do this, to find out what happened here.
You mentioned that you wrote the New York City mayor after this happened. Have you heard back? I'm curious about that.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that there was no advance notice. I did write a letter. I don't have a response. What conclusion can I come to besides the fact that you're just going to continue this? You don't care what happens in our upstate communities. You're not aware of our challenges that we face. We have poverty. We have people with personal hardships. We have people that are, as I said, placed there by social services for a number of different reasons. They could be crime victims. It could be domestic violence. It could be a number of different reasons. And I think that the Attorney General really should go forward with this and find out who is responsible. We need to hold people accountable, because this situation could easily repeat itself. And it could be more individuals next time around.
So another part of the bill would require the mayor of New York City, or if this was another situation where another mayor was relocating asylum seekers across the state, they would have to file monthly reports on who these people are, how many people, where have they gone, everything like that. Basically, tracking all this information and keeping it in one place and making it available to the public. What's the benefit of those reports? Why would you want those?
I think that is an important part of the bill. This bill is about transparency. This bill is about letting everybody know what information is out there, what information is available. I think it's all helpful information. And there's a number of different categories in these monthly reports. And to have an idea, how many children are we talking about? Why is that important? The school district now in Rotterdam is asking questions. Yeah. There's 100 kids coming into the school district, or whatever the number is. We need to know that. How can we prepare? September's almost here. I understand there was individuals that were pregnant. There was pregnant women. So, the medical need, our EMS contacted me. They want to know what's going on because they need to be prepared. One source we didn't hear information from, that was the mayor of New York City. We didn't hear anything from them, but we heard everything that was going on after the fact from everybody else in the community. That's not the way this is supposed to work.
I should clarify that the people who were kicked out of the motel, that wasn't necessarily the New York City mayor's decision. It was a decision by the Super 8 Motels management, their owner, presumably because they were able to get funding from the New York City mayor's office that might have provided more stability or maybe more revenue from them. We don't really know why, but why not have any part of the bill target that kind of behavior against business owners like that, kicking these people out?
Well, I think this bill is a transparency bill, a government transparency bill. And I think the communication part, if this bill were in place, that advanced communication might have prevented that from happening in the first place. We could have known and maybe could have prevented all this. But you're right, the motel owner does bear responsibility here. Perhaps that is a separate bill that could be forthcoming, and I think it may be needed at some point. I know Schenectady County did pass a resolution that talked about this issue as well. And there may be, this is where the AG's investigation comes in. And I think if this investigation goes forward, and I hope that it will, we may get some more insight on what exactly can be done legislatively, or is there something in place already that holds individuals like this responsible. There may be something on the books already, but until we have this investigation completed, we probably won't know the answer to that. But in the meantime, I think that getting this bill in place will probably prevent this situation in the future.
The legislature is out of session until January, unless you come back before January, which I think may be in the cards anyway because of other situations like the Seneca Gaming Compact, a lot of stuff up in the air. Do you have any sense of what the support might look like for this when it does come up in January?
Well, I think that based on what I've heard so far, I have talked to my colleagues. I'm interested in garnering as much support as I can because I do have a Senate sponsor at this point, so I have it placed in both houses. I am talking to fellow legislators. Everyone seems very supportive. There are some suggestions. So you may see some changes to the bill, some amendments.
Usually happens.
Yeah, and almost always there's some changes. But I'm gathering those thoughts ahead of time, so that if there are some changes I have to make, some minor changes, we can do that because we want to have full support. And I heard, I'm hearing the same thing you're hearing, that there's a good possibility we'll go back before the end of the year. And I know there's other bills out there that people are talking about. So I want this bill to be ready. I think it makes sense. It's just one of those good government bills that says, hey, if you're going to do something, you got to let people know. I don't think that's too much to ask. Not to hear from Mayor Adams at this point. It's been a long time now. I did talk to my congressman who represents the area, who's also been trying to reach Mayor Adams, and he said the same thing. It's been complete silence. We haven't heard back. So I think to change course here, cease this type of behavior. And come up with a new way that's a better strategy that's coordinated is the way to go. For the motel owner, I wrote him a letter as well, or I wrote the company that owns it a letter as well.
Right.
And I asked them, you need to be part of the solution here. What are you going to do to fix this, is what my letter says. You can't just walk away here. You have a responsibility. You were part of this. How are you going to change your practices going forward, be a part of this community, and be a part of the solution? And what are you going to do to help the individuals that got thrown out?
This is clearly a situation that is not going away, at least not anytime soon. These people are coming here to seek asylum, and that is not a process that is done in 2 months. It's usually something that is more than a year, maybe up to 2 years or more at some different points. Do you think that the state should try to step in and play a larger role in connecting these types of things? The governor and the mayor of New York City have a pretty close relationship. Do you think that she should take advantage of that?
I think that, certainly the state has a role, but really the federal government needs to step in here. I've written letters to all of our federal representatives, and they really need to get involved in this situation and advocate for policies that promote good government, that promote the coordination and communication. They need to do that at the federal level, but they also need to address the migrant issue, and it is a federal issue at the end of the day. The states are being forced to deal with this, just as the town of Rotterdam. This situation was forced on us. It was forced on the state. I know it's the town of Rotterdam, but you represent the town of Rotterdam at the federal level. They all need to be involved and be a part of the solution. They also need to be contacting the mayor's office, the governor's office, saying, hey, we can't have this. This is a situation. We can't have people getting thrown out onto the street that have a number of different challenges themselves. Now, what can be done at the federal level? A lot more can be done. So hence the need for their involvement in this situation. What happened in Rotterdam? What else can happen? The next time this happens, could it be more people? Could it harm more individuals? And the answer is, if it happens again, there's a good chance that it will. So you can't just sit around and wait for that to happen. You have to be proactive at this point and put a stop to these practices, this irresponsible practice that the mayor in New York City is engaging in, and put an end to that and get involved in the discussion on going forward. How is this going to work? I don't know when this bill is going to pass. Hopefully, I said maybe before the end of the year. But between now and then, what else could happen? A lot could happen. Hence, we need federal representatives to get involved in the situation and deal with what is a federal issue.
All right, this is a bill that we will definitely be watching. Assemblymember Angelo Santabarbara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show.